A love of learning, other than genealogical lore, was far from general among them, but there remained still a few in the older families who studied their own books, and even gathered reports of old times and distant lands from elves, dwarfs, and men. Their own records began only after the settlement of the Shire, and their most ancient legends hardly looked further back than their wandering days. It is clear, nonetheless, from these legends and from the evidence of their peculiar words and customs, that like many other folks, hobbits had in the distant past moved westward. Their earliest tales seem to glimpse a time when they dwelt in the upper vales of Anduin, between the eaves of Greenwood the Great and the Misty Mountains. Why they later undertook the hard and peculiar crossing of the mountains into Eriador is no longer certain. Their own accounts speak of the multiplying of man in the land, and of a shadow that fell on the forest, so it became darkened, and its new name was Mirkwood. Before the crossing of the mountains, the hobbits had already become divided into three somewhat different breeds: harfoots, stoors, and fellowhides. The harfoots were browner of skin, smaller and shorter, and they were beardless and bootless. Their hands and feet were neat and nimble, and they preferred highlands and hillsides. The stoors were broader, heavier in build, their feet and hands were larger, and they preferred flat lands and riversides. The fellowhides were fairer of skin and also of hair, and they were taller and slimmer than the others. They were lovers of trees and of woodlands. The harfoots had much to do with dwarfs in ancient times, and long lived in the foothills of the mountains. They moved westward early, and roamed over Eriador as far as Weathertop, while the others were still in the wilder land. They were the most normal and representative variety of hobbit, and far the most numerous. They were the most inclined to settle in one place, and longest preserved their ancestral habits of living in tunnels and holes. The stoors lingered long by the banks of the great river Anduin, and were less shy of man. They came west after the harfoots and followed the course of the loud water southwards, and there many of them long dwelt between Thabarat and the borders of Dunland before they moved north again. The fellowhides, the least numerous, were a northerly branch. They were more friendly with elves than the other hobbits were, and had more skill in language and song than in handicrafts, and of old they preferred hunting to tilling. They crossed the mountain north of Rivendell and came down the river Horwell. In Eriador they soon mingled with the other kinds that had preceded them, but being somewhat bolder and more adventurous, they were often found as leaders or chieftains among clans of harfoots and stoors. Even in Bilbo's time, the strong fellowhidish strain could still be noted among the greater families, such as the Tooks or the Masters of Buckland.